I think I know what he's going to talk about. I love this topic.
Pregnancy, war, MMORPGs. What do these all have in common? They all require multiple people. But if
No, because remember Jesus?
MMORPG multiplayer, why play MMORPG alone? This is a question philosophers dating back to ancient Greece have thought about for centuries and even years. And today, the topic of playing MMOs solo is still a big point of discussion. I mean, just look at all the videos about it already made.
Yep.
Luckily for you, I'm also going to make a video about it.
Thank God.
In the recent past, we've seen tons of solo-oriented game modes added to MMORPGs, usually called solo self-found modes, where you can't group with people, you can't trade with people, you have to earn everything yourself. RuneScape calls it Iron Man mode because
it's basically the same thing. And I think that the reason why people like playing solo games in MMOs is because it makes playing solo in MMOs, it makes them feel less lonely, and it's a place for them to show off accomplishments and see other accomplishments that other people have had too. It's online, yeah. An MMO doesn't mean, like, massively multiplayer. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're playing together all the time. It just means that there are other players in the game. And there are.
it's cooler. And while these solo challenge modes are a relatively new thing, solo play in an MMO kind of isn't. In the days of early MMORPGs before World of Warcraft, MMOs were largely unsoloable. EverQuest was a notoriously difficult and punishing game that really required grouping to make any sort of meaningful progress.
And people might not remember this. I don't know if he's going to bring this up or not. World of Warcraft, one of the big innovations that it had is that you could play the entire game to 60 solo. Like, that was a huge selling point for it.
The same goes for games like Anarchy Online with its sandbox-style punishing open-world PvP system. If you tried to tackle that game alone, you'd probably just die instantly. But with the release of World of Warcraft in 2004, everything changed. You could make significant progress on your character completely on your own. Almost every quest and early profession could be taken on.
And as always, WoW, the greatest MMO of all time, classic WoW, had the best mix of the two, where obviously you also had group quests that were extremely lucrative and very rewarding. So you were tremendously rewarded for playing in a group, but it never really felt like it was required. It's just the best game ever made, right? Best MMO ever made. It's just how it is.
Without the help of anyone else. Something the genre had never seen before. I mean, RuneScape existed since 2001 and was also a game that you could solo in a lot of ways, but people always seem to forget it, so I'm just gonna forget it too, I guess. World of Warcraft, whether the devs knew it or not, legitimized a valid way to experience MMORPGs that made the genre more accessible than it had ever been. So let me explain why lately it's been a
I remember, like, my mom, the reason why she liked playing WoW is the fact that she didn't have to play with anybody else all the time. And she would get frustrated in later expansions whenever she felt like she needed to raid in order to get gear. And in, like, classic WoW, she didn't have to do that as much, and in Burning Crusade, because she could just buy BOEs.
Very bad thing for these games. I want to make one thing clear, though. I love playing solo. I would say it's the primary way I experience MMORPGs.
Same with me.
Solo players and solo content have a place in MMORPGs. My issue is with the way devs are handling this content. Either trying to
Most developers make solo content the easy brain-dead content for the dads with 6 jobs, 3 wives, and 5 kids. But the truth is that a lot of people love difficult solo content like the Mage Tower. And also, like, RuneScape challenges.
Stop people from playing solo, or to cater to solo players a little too heavy-handedly. Both of these sides lose sight of what makes solo play in an MMORPG great. I also think that solo MMOs are... Sorry guys, this is the manifestation of my internalized anxiety. What are you doing here?
I got married, I thought you'd know.
Great.
Been playing a ton of Warships.
What's World of Warships?
Oh, this is the game. I don't know what
Sorry,
this
not to
is.
cut you off, but I think it might be easier if you just possess my body and then speak through me.
World of Warships is a free-to-play naval warfare simulation game available now on PC and consoles, and they're also the sponsor of today's video.
That's a good way to do
World
it.
of Warships right now at the link in the description. And
oh yeah, I did this yesterday, but I just drove into the fucking
starter pack full of things like
into the building.
Balloons, 1.5 million credits,
yeah,
7 days of premium account access, and a free ship once you complete 10 battles. Oh man, dude, that actually sounds really cool. How about I talk about the rest of World of
War
Warships?
Thunder? Yeah, I know. It's just
my body.
It's just. Really I know it's not the same game, guys. You think I actually thought it was the same game?
Released every single month. I mean, that's wild.
Do you really think that?
Like new ships, new cosmetics, and more, and it's all tied together with these state-of-the-art.
Can you blow up like a whale?
Dynamic weather, water textures that make the game look like the real deal.
If they make a whaling mode where like you can go out in like a 1900 ship and like go out and hunt Moby Dick, then maybe I'd play it. That'd be cool.
Oh, come on, man, don't possess me. Time to join the Discord and see what's going on in there. Dude,
you can do that in Black Flag? Really?
Please don't possess me.
Download World of Warships now at the link in the description, and don't forget to use code BRAVO to get all those free goodies I talked about earlier. Part 1. Why we play alone. It's important that we figure out why people even choose to play solo in the first place.
Yeah.
It's a topic that to this day confuses Redditors and forum posters, and those are some of
the reason why people like this get confused is because they're stupid. That's the reason. They're just stupid, and so like it's easy to get confused if you're dumb. The reason why I like playing solo is because I have complete autonomy over what I'm doing. Whenever I'm playing with somebody else, I have to compromise what I'm doing in order to fit them. Or they are compromising what they're doing in order to fit me. Whereas for me, if I want to go AFK for 5 minutes, I can just do that and I'm never inconveniencing somebody. I can play completely on my own with no restrictions or issues at all.
The smartest people in the world. Like I said before, this is a well-treaded topic on YouTube, but I keep coming back to this talk at GEC by prolific MMO game designer Damien Schubert. Damien's worked on games ranging from Meridian 59,
that was the first MMO.
First ever 3D MMORPG.
Yeah.
He's also worked on The Sims Online, which is one of the MMOs ever made. And at the time of the talk in 2011, he was the lead designer on Star Wars: The Old Republic. Ever heard of it? You haven't? Oh, it's an MMO. Now Damien spends his time on Twitter complaining about protesters and giving his opinion on rap beef by saying, "You think Drake versus Kendrick is crazy? You should try listening to Fleetwood Mac."
Nice.
In this talk called The Loner, Damien talks about why and what types of people play alone in a genre that's greatest selling point is the multiplayer aspect. One really great point he touches on early is that the ability to be a loner is a uniquely MMO experience. The whole concept of a loner is predicated on the existence of other players. That in and of itself is a reason someone might want to...
That's actually a really good point. Yeah, that's a very good point. Like basically that people are... You can't be a loner if it's a single player game. Yeah.
Play solo. It's like making an out-of-the-box build in an RPG and challenging yourself to complete the game. It's not a wrong way to play, it's a unique way to...
And also, like, again, I always go back to a lot of the isekai animes. That's what I always... Because, like, I view those as, like, a really good temperature read of the type of aesthetic and fantasy people want to fulfill. And a lot of them are solo games. Not all of them, but a lot of them are solo ones.
Play, and it's a cool feeling even if you prefer playing alone to see other real people running around playing the same game as you. You can play solo and still feel like you're a part of the community. This type of player is one Damien describes as the soloer, a player who is either challenging themselves or just enjoys the MMORPG for what it is. They enjoy grinding and questing and leveling, and for them, participating in that experience with other players isn't that important. This is just one of 10 types of loners Damien talks about in his talk, but if I went through all of them...
And I think this is also why MMOs are so appealing to people that are like kind of loners or introverted. It's because MMOs do provide an incentive for you to actually come out of your shell and play with other people, like classic WoW did. It's like, yeah, you can, you know, grind gnolls, or you can come out of your fucking shell, make a group for Hogger, and get a really nice pair of legs too.
Subway surfers on the screen to keep your attention, and I'm not willing to do that. Plus, some of the types of players he talks about are just like, I don't want to call them wrong, but
this is the section about me, and yes, this is true.
They're just like interesting. No, I'm not putting Subway Surfers back on the screen. The first player Damien touches on is the new player. New players, I think, are the best example of a forgotten type of solo players. These aren't people who are necessarily choosing.
Yeah, like I would join a guild and everybody else thought the guild existed to clear a raid. The guild existed for me to get into the guild bank. That was the game I was playing. They didn't know that. Now they found out, but they didn't know that until it happened.
Play solo, or they might not even be people who want to play solo. But when you start a new game, especially an MMO, there's a lot going on.
And the reason why it's fun to do that in MMOs is that you can't really be an absolute unhinged psychopath in real life. You can't do it. They'll put you in jail. But you can do it in a game.
To take in. If a game has the ability to be soloed early on so that new players can take their time, learn the abilities, feel out how the game mechanics work, and all around get their feet under them, they'll be a lot more prepared and willing to do group content in the future. This comfort is also a lot more likely to retain players, because while boring a new player is seen as the cardinal sin of game design, overwhelming them is just as bad. And
that's what a lot of MMOs have a problem with now, is that because a lot of MMOs have had a long tenure, there's like all of these secondary systems and things that you need to know in order to just be able to play the game. The worst one, I think, was probably, I remember I almost wanted to turn off my stream whenever I played Tower Fantasy. Like, whenever I saw how many menus and shit there were in that game, I was like, almost like, yo, bro, fuck this shit, I'm done. But it was BDO.
Extremely overwhelming. The comments on the talk, which I think are super valuable in and of themselves, say as much. Other players, when you're trying to take your time and learn about the game or the lore, often just get in the way. Wait, did I just call a comment section valuable? That can't be right. Let me find one that's absolutely worthless. This guy swallowing heavily in the microphone is the thing I'll remember most of this conference.
Thank you, Gabriel.
That's pretty worthless, but I mean, he has a point. Damien, drink some water. The last type of person Damien identifies that I want to talk about is what he calls the lunch at your desk type.
Yeah.
He just means grown-ups. Hey, Future Idol here. I'm being really mean to Damien right now. It's a good talk. I don't know why I was so rude to him. Over the years, the average MMO player has gotten older, which, despite sounding like a stupidly obvious statement, is also true. Like, back in the day, there were a bunch of teenagers and people in their early 20s and literal children running around these games. But today, you're not gonna find very many children at all on MMORPGs. That's why the Minecraft YouTubers won't log on. The average MMO player today is much more likely to be a 30-year-old with a full-time job and potentially even a kid or two. And
I feel like that's a really bad thing, by the way. That's awful. Like, whenever you have an aging audience, you know what happens? Whenever you age, you die. That's what happens. So if you have an aging audience, those people are eventually just going to float away from the game. They're just going to drift away. And yeah, like, you need to have a new audience of people coming in regularly. I think that's a huge problem that MMOs have, is that kids don't play them as much anymore.
You have that much
There's no new blood. Yeah, exactly.
Filling up your schedule, it can be hard to find an uninterrupted 2 or 3 hours to do a raid or a group questing session. I mean, hell, it could even be hard to find a 45-minute period to do a dungeon run. And even if these types of players do find...
Well, and it's also, like, even if you find the time, a lot of people don't like the fact that they get locked in. Like, you are now locked into doing this. You can't stop doing it if you don't feel like doing it for a few minutes.
3 hours to play the game uninterrupted, their social battery might be so drained that they really value the time to just play on their own.
That's what happened with me. I was much more social in-game, and I had a lot more, like, I did a lot more things, like, with my guild and everything before I started streaming and started OTK. Whereas, like, now, if somebody messages me in-game, I'm like, oh.
Are busy people, and they're also just all around worse. Like the all grown up TV
I don't like the commitment.
It was worse than Rugrats. That's like the whole point. That's the video I said. There are obviously a ton of other reasons someone might prefer to or even need to play solo in an MMO, and Damien's talk does a good job of touching on a lot of those, so I'd highly recommend watching it. I just felt the need to add this section to defend people like me who get told we're a paradox for playing an MMO mostly or entirely alone. But if I'm saying all of this to support solo style play, what's with the title of the video? Well, that's because of the thing.
If an MMO doesn't create a good solo player experience, it's going to die, and it's going to be bad. That's it. Because you're not going to get casual players. You need that massive foundation of casuals. That's what a game like WoW has. It has an army of casual dads. Yeah, a lot of people don't have friends. Like, for me, it's I don't really want to make a lot of friends. I don't want to deal with it. I just want to go in and get my stuff and get out. Remember I told you guys about my favorite raid? It's that one time in Siege of Orgrimmar where I came in and we killed all the bosses on the first try and I never joined Discord. Or it was Mumble at the time. And then I said, all right, guys, same time next week. See you later. And that was it. Problem solved. Best raid I was ever in.
Pop up on the screen. Part 2. Fixing I can't do an accent. As I've said multiple times in this video, the persistent multiplayer worlds of MMORPGs are their most unique and greatest selling point. There's a very good reason for MMOs to try their best to steer into group content. The content that takes up the most design, development, and QA time in any MMO is multiplayer content.
It's a group shit, yeah.
I'm sorry, I couldn't keep a straight face saying QA. I know these guys aren't testing their games. Yeah. Raids, dungeons, elite quests, or heroic quests, or whatever you want to call your special quests, fates, etc. Tons of examples of content that require or strongly encourage having a group. And a lot of this content is seen as the highlight of the game by the community that plays it. Multiplayer content.
No, it's seen as the highlight of the game by the outspoken minority of the community that talks about it on the internet. Which is already like 3 degrees of concentric circles of investment.
And also has the added benefit of being one of the best ways to convert casual players into hardcore players. This is something else that Damien brings up in his GDC talk. Every player starts off as a casual player, but over time and at their own pace, if everything goes well, they'll drift closer and closer to being a hardcore
It's
player.
like a drug
and the
addiction.
Goal for every MMO is to get casual players to being
That's right. Get them addicted.
Multiplayer content being the best way to create hardcore players isn't really surprising. When you look at a ton of endgame content, which tends to be the multiplayer content, it all lives down here on the spectrum.
Right.
And if you do enough multiplayer content, you'll start to form social bonds with other players, and there's no better way to get people connected to a game than for them to have actual relationships formed through that game. I'm sure we all have friends that we met on our favorite MMORPGs from our childhood we either still talk to or at the very least still think about every so often. I'd like to quickly apologize also if you're an active
It's very, very true. I made a lot of friends whenever I was a kid. Like, McConnell was one right there. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of people that I was like friends with in MMOs and everything. And like we would even like I remember like I had a Ninja and Guild Banks. I remember my friend, we had a guild together, and I log in one day, and everybody was leaving the guild, and it was a disaster, and I looked, and half of everything was in the guild bank was gone. And so I message him, I say, bro, what's going on? He says, dude, I took half the guild bank, the other half is yours. Let's transfer servers and go to another guild together. I got us in. And I was like, okay. Okay. Yeah. And we just left. That's my boy, man. Yeah. What a genius. Yeah.
MMO player, I did not mean to put you on a second spectrum. Anyway, game designers
want
to make sure they can get as many people to this multiplayer content as possible. And that means they have to fix solo players. I mean, these players aren't doing dungeons. They're not raiding. They haven't joined a guild. They didn't even join the server's Discord channels to say a slur.
Yeah.
Are they even playing?
They're not real
MMO?
people.
To fix these players, MMOs will sometimes create roadblocks in main storylines or character progression that can cannot be advanced unless you participate in a group activity. Diablo Immortal does this by having literal dungeons that you need to be in a group in, and they are required for the main story.
Oh, like Leoric. I remember that, yes.
Tell me Diablo Immortal's not an MMORPG because Blizzard can't seem to figure out that Diablo was never meant to be one, even though they keep treating it like one. Like, why was Diablo 3 always online? Why is Diablo 4 just a lightweight MMO? They're not MMOs. Stop it. Sorry, this isn't supposed to be a video essay about Diablo. Unless
it was, yeah. They did have some weird shit. Undecember, literally why I stopped playing. That game, the funny thing about Undecember is, like, whenever I played it, I thought the game was great. I just stopped playing it. And then they made the game not pay to win. And I was like, wow, maybe I should really play it. I just never played it.
You'd want me to do that. Even real MMOs like Final Fantasy XIV with its story dungeons force some degree of multiplayer on you.
Yeah.
The problem with this design
I think you can play with what are called trusts, and it's like you play with bots that are basically supposed to be players, but yeah.
Isn't even that it gets in the way of solo players' experience, forcing them to do something they don't want to do.
Is that Kratos?
It's that it doesn't even accomplish the goal these devs are hoping it does. Social bonds are a fast track to creating hardcore players, but throwing players together in a dungeon that uses a group finder tool anyway so they can clear it super fast without ever saying a word to each other is not social. This article
exactly. He's completely right. Forcing people into playing groups that are just throwaway groups that nobody cares about, this does not make your game multiplayer. Those people are NPCs.
McAdams back in 2020 says as much, but in more detail and better written, despite the fact that he uses the dictionary defines social as line, which is not great, Andy, let's be honest. Andy does do a great job of diving into how social bonds are formed and what makes them meaningful, and comes to the conclusion that you very rarely meet a new friend because you were forced to group with them on a project. These changes all attempt to fix a type of player that isn't broken. Some players just want to play solo, others will seek out the multiplayer content if you did a good job designing it and designing meaningful but not forceful incentives to participate in it. Forcing them to...
Yeah, all you have to do is provide the opportunity to do it with group content, and you will have people make friends naturally. It will just happen on its own. Just in an open world, you're going to see somebody else and you're going to play with them. It will happen eventually. And give people a few advantages, like in classic WoW. Like original BDO was like that. I remember we had like a little guild. Everybody was in Discord together. It was great.
Change how they play the game isn't converting them into a hardcore player.
Yeah.
It's converting them into...
This is why I said, like, bro, like Diablo, like, not Diablo, he said Diablo. LFR. LFR is not multiplayer. It's not. This is not. It's just a waste of time. It's just bad content. Throw away random queuing content that you have a 100% success rate at. In my opinion, maybe hot take, just take it out of the game. Get rid of it. It's trash. It's boring. It's garbage. Like, what's the point? Why does it exist? Like, why make somebody do this? Why not just give them the thing and let them do something else that's fun?
Different game. I'm not trying to say there shouldn't be efforts made to break solo players out of their shell, but forcing them into group content is just not the way to do that. And hey, I see you other MMOs who are bragging about catering to solo players with your content updates. You think you're off the hook on this one, right? You think so? Oh gosh. Part 3, fixing solo play. Because
the developers that talk about making the game for solo players are also just as dumb as the ones that are talking about make the game for multiplayer players. If you listen to the insights of a very good game designer, like, again, the legend Kevin Jordan, it is very obvious that these are two sides of the same coin. And you do not make a game for single player, enjoyers or multiplayer enjoyers. You create a game that has different opportunities for different types of players for different reasons. So everything is dumb? No, but focusing on it is bad.
part 2 was fixing solo players, so this is the same, but it's like a theme. Solo players don't need to be fixed. There's nothing wrong with us.
Yeah.
But you know what else doesn't need to be fixed? Solo play. Some MMOs have correctly identified that a strong solo player base is almost as if
unpopular opinion. The New World chest runs were fucking fun. I thought they were really cool. I liked them.
Just as important as a strong social player base. For that reason, they've made sure to cater new updates to solo players either exclusively or in addition to the standard multiplayer crowd. This is a great thing to do if you're planning a new leveling zone or continent or quest line, having interesting multiplayer content but making sure there's plenty to do.
What do they do to Ilaria, bro? She looks like an NPC. She used to be hot as hell. What the fuck happened? This shit's so cringe, bro. Like, what the fuck? That bow's sick, though? Yeah, but the bow she had before was sick, too.
Solo player as well is great game design that has been done for decades in the genre at this point. The problem comes up when the line blurs between multiplayer and solo content. The best example of this, in my opinion, is Old School RuneScape.
Yeah.
Back in 2017, Old School RuneScape got a new piece of content called Raids, and it was touted as the first ever piece of content that really required other players to get best in slot loot.
Right.
I mean that with all due respect to the Cowfight Queen and to the King Black Dragon. By 2017, they were both soloable and also irrelevant. Eventually, players did find out how to solo this raid, and it's now a very popular thing to do, but it took some time and it's still decently difficult. But with the next raid, the Theater of Blood, the Old School RuneScape team really set out to make the hardest raid yet, and also one that would not be soloable. And while Theater of Blood has been soloed before, it's very, very few players who have ever done
that
it,
guy.
and it requires
Wooks.
ton of skill and time.
Yeah.
Theater of Blood stands as the only piece of content that you're really gonna need to group up with other players to do if you want.
Wait, is this like the Fall Guys map? Not really? Okay, never mind.
Loot from it. But with the third raid is when we got an interesting design shift from Jagex, the creators of Old School RuneScape. This third raid, called Tombs of a Mascot, featured variable difficulty through the invocation system, meaning you could choose what mechanics bosses did and didn't have to make the raid as hard as you wanted to make it. Obviously, this comes with changes in how common loot drops are and what the best drops you can get are. But something else they did that I thought was really weird is that they actually put design considerations in the raid for if you entered solo. Things like making certain rooms just faster to complete if you're alone.
This was always... So, like, again, if I go back to my oldest videos, you know what they all were? How to solo raids. 15 fucking years ago. I used to love doing this because I like the idea of it, you know? It just sounded fucking awesome.
So the variable difficulty combined with these design considerations means that solo was and is a completely viable way to do this raid, and in some cases it can even be optimal. Is it really the end of the world to have a solo option for a piece of content like this? No. Not really, but I do think it adds a lot to an MMORPG to have parts that are designed specifically and exclusively for groups. Some of you might be thinking that...
Well, like another great example of this, like recently, is Lucilius in Grand Blue Fantasy Relink. Is like they made him really hard, and like you were gonna need to have a group for it. No, you don't. No, you don't. If you do it if you've got the right characters, you can AFK that shit. And so, yeah, Mandalorian, the solo boss in OSRS, best feeling ever? Yeah, exactly. And so, like, that's part of the fun for me.
The best items behind
Can't kill him even with a group. It's probably easier without one.
Forced multiplayer, like I talked about in part 2, but I don't think it is. In vanilla World of Warcraft, you can level from 1 to 60 completely on your own, comfortably, and have a great time doing it. Along the way, though, with the elite quests and dungeons you'd have skipped, you'd be missing out on some of the best gear in the game for leveling. The difference there is that solo play is viable, but it's not optimal. Content that can be soloed exists throughout the game, but having group content that is extremely worth doing but not strictly speaking required is a really good thing.
Again, just classic WoW, best MMO ever made. It's just another example of it. He's right.
already. I'm a solo player, and when it came time to do my first Dead Mines in World of Warcraft Classic, I was dreading it. I hate talking to other people, and I especially hate letting those people down and having them flame me in chat. I don't know why, but it scares me. But I really wanted the Cruel Bard from Edwin Van Cleef, and I especially wanted the Tunic of Westfall from the quest line that ended in the Dead Mines. And if I really wanted that stuff, I had to just bite the bullet and put myself in a social situation. And what ended up happening is I had a ton of fun. A lot of that fun came from the fact that we
had the opposite, where it was like everybody in my old guild, whenever raid time was happening, nobody was friends. Nobody was friends. Like, nope. There's no talking. You're not having fun. Nobody's laughing. There's no bullshit. There's nothing. No, this is before Indestructible. And everybody, after the raid, would join their own little channels in Discord, and, we'd have fun and everything like that. But raid, that was not the fun time. Yeah, no fun allowed. This was back in Ventrilo. Sounds awful? No, it was amazing. It was so good. See, you might not understand that, but, for me, I want to join the raid. I don't want to hear about Kathy's day. Nobody gives a fuck, right? But there's 3 other simps in the guild that care, so she can go talk to them after the raid. I don't want to hear about it during the raid. I want to hear about, okay, so we're going to kill this boss. We've got this thing here. Okay, here's the plan. We're going to have him here. Why were you standing there? Okay, because you're a fucking idiot. All right, great. You going to do it again? No? Okay, let's not kick him out then. There it is. You move on. Everybody is there to do a fucking job, and that's it. And it can feel, whenever you have everybody operating at maximum efficiency, with complete focus, it feels really fucking good. It does.
Group through an actual chat system, meaning we had to actually send at least one message to each other. And once you send one message, it gets a lot easier to send a bunch more. So you start joking around with these people, or one of them turns out to be role-playing, and that's fun. I have had some bad experiences in dungeons, but also a lot of my favorite experiences are from grouping up with other people for these dungeons, or for the quests, or for even raids. It's the one time I get to experience the truly exclusive thing an MMORPG can offer me. And all that happened not because I was forced to do it, but because I was sufficiently tempted by good design to do it. I still, to this day, play
for me, I would always find, meta games inside of, different groups that I would create for myself. I had one game where it was how could I do the least damage in the raid and still, not get kicked out? Or how can I kill the most people in this raid without getting kicked out? And so, I remember I had this one thing. There was this boss in Throne of Thunder. His name was Darumu. And what he would do is he would cast a beam, and the beam would kill you. So I was a priest. I had a priest, and I would just life grip people through the beam, and it would kill them. That was it. And that was better than doing the raid. And I would create, all these, meta level things to do. Yeah, Darumu was really bad in Mop Remix too. Yeah, there you go. Tiny Viol. No, I mean, I had that. I even made, a whole video on how to get people killed in LFR. I had all these other meta level things that I would do. This is I would join raids and join Discord just to make people mad. I didn't have a job. So I did this all the time. And that's the real meta game.
Warcraft, primarily solo. It's how I like to level. But I really love getting the chance to break that up with some group content that just feels good and feels natural. So the question becomes, how do we get more of that? Part 4. We literally already figured that out. It's what are you doing here, guys? Making solo play fun without making it required or hindering the multiplayer aspect of MMOs is a solved problem. RuneScape solved it. Guild Wars 2 solved it. World of Warcraft solved it. For some reason, these games, old and new, are now trying to force themselves to either be entirely soloable or entirely multiplayer.
Well, the reason why is that if you listen to the interviews with a lot of the developers that make the new games, these people are profoundly stupid. So it would make sense. The designers, they don't know what they're doing. They're bad at their own game. They don't even know what's going on in their own game. So it's yeah, obviously you're having trouble. You don't know what the problems are. How could you know what the problems are? You're not even playing the game.
And multiplayer are not at odds with each other. They're not harming each other. They can and have existed in MMOs for decades. Devs should absolutely continue to consider solo players when designing new content, but they should also remember when multiplayer content fits in best. They're designing an MMO. You'd be stupid to ignore the M. The analogy I made before about making a bad build in an RPG is exactly how solo play should be viewed. A bad build doesn't need to be balanced and made as good as all the other builds in the game. What's important is that a player who chooses a suboptimal build can enjoy the game and even get to the end of it, even if that
I think that if you have multiplayer content that is to be expected, you have to make it to where there are no bad builds. You can't have bad builds or bad classes, because then nobody will play with you. That's just what happens. Look at classic WoW. It's a great idea, right? But it just doesn't work in reality.
They'll do it slowly. As long as it's fun, it's okay.
No bad builds in PoE equals dead. Well, no. PoE is not a multiplayer game at all. There is no content in PoE that requires multiplayer, but in WoW there is. I'm talking about, PoE is not multiplayer. It's not an MMO.
So for the love of God, stop forcing me to play in a group to advance your main storyline. I'll group if I want to, or if you've tempted me enough. Until then, I'm just gonna blast the Sonic Frontier soundtrack and kill 25 goblins like a good little gamer boy.
Yep. I think he's right. I think this is the real truth, right? Is that with a lot of these games, there's not really an incentive to either play in a group or play solo. And I think it's because the developers don't really understand why people want to play solo or why people want to play in a group. And so they assume that the reason why people don't want to play in a group is because something is hard. That's not really the reason. The reason is because people just don't want to play with somebody else because they don't want to. It's that simple. It's the same as you don't want to go out some nights, you just want to stay inside. Well, some people want to stay inside their own fucking game, too. There's the video. This is a great fucking video. Bridge that gap very well a lot lately. Well, that's because they keep trying to force people into doing it. That's the big issue, is they force people into trying to, really push, oh, well, we're going to try to get you out of your shell. We're going to try to get you to play this game or get you to do this thing. I don't think that's possible. If you make somebody do something, that doesn't make them enjoy it. And there's a lot of developers that try to force you into a certain type of behavior. And then it's okay, well then now I'm just kind of I have to play the game this way. Well, I don't want to play the game this way. I'm just not going to play the game. And I think that the biggest reason why people play solo is because of the freedom that it gives them. Most people don't want to deal with somebody else's shit. And that doesn't necessarily mean talking to them. It means having to wait for them to go AFK. It means not being able to go AFK yourself. It means being able to just oh, I don't feel like doing this. I'm going to do it halfway and then I'm just going to stop. I'll do the rest later. You have complete freedom to do whatever you want. And usually you're not actually going to exercise that freedom. However, the fact that you have it makes it feel a lot better. And I think that's the big difference that a lot of these games don't have, is they take the freedom away from the player, even though the player was never going to use the freedom. And it's I remember this so well. Back whenever the COVID restrictions were happening, Austin put a lockdown notice and they said, don't go outside anymore. We don't want you to go outside anymore. Obviously, I went outside and I was walking down to the store. I saw more people outside that day than any other fucking day. Everybody was outside that day. They were saying hello to each other. They were oh yeah, how you doing? Oh, well, how's COVID treating you? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because it was fake because you don't go outside. Well, that I did for this one, right? And yeah, tons of people were going outside. And would they have gone outside on their own? No, but they don't like being told what to do. They don't like feeling locked in. That's what I get afraid of. I get afraid of being locked in and not being able to just immediately disconnect from something. That's the way I feel more than anything else. Coming from the lower person, I just want the freedom to get up every 5 minutes if I want to. Yeah, exactly. It's really not that complicated. I just don't want to have somebody else, being locked in versus having a choice. Yeah, it's really that simple. And that's the biggest reason. It's not because of raids or social anxiety or social battery or anything else. Like, I just don't want to have to deal with people. Like, I don't want to have to think about their shit. I just want to think about my shit. And that's it. Everything else is fucking irrelevant.